First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody. We got a great crowd here today. We did sell out. We wanted to have 80 people here, and I think we got about exactly 80. All right, so we did good, and everybody got a seat, and everybody got some food. So fantastic. I'm glad everybody's here. My name's Steve Aquino, and I'm with Aquino and Walpole Financial Group, and I'm proud to be serving as the chairman of the board for the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce this year. Also the co-host of the Carroll County Buzz, so tune in tonight on WTTR. Got Jack Tevis is going to be our guest tonight. Before we get started, I think everybody knows this, but make sure you turn off your cell phones, which everybody probably has it already on vibrate. So we have that taken care of. Again, thank you all for coming today, and I trust you're enjoying your lunch. With a crowd like this, we are trying to get things moving along so we stay on time and get everybody out of here in time. Today is our annual county budget luncheon. We'll be hearing shortly from Ted Zaleski, the Director of Management and Budget for Carroll County. Ted has graciously been providing informative insights into the county budget, the chamber members for years, and we look forward to what he has to share with us today. Allow me to introduce our two sponsors who will be speaking during this program. Please stand and be recognized when I call your name. We have Ryan Hastings, who is the principal with Rager, Lehman and Houck, PC, Carroll County Chamber member for the last 58 years. Wow. So that's fantastic.
I'm gonna clap for that one.
That's great. And next we have Dave Peliquin, who's president of Main Street Advisor and has been a member of the chamber for over 11 years. So welcome. Next, I'd like to recognize the former chairs of the board for the chamber. First, we have Brenda Fisher, as she's taking a bite, so we'll go right to her first, with New Windsor State Bank. We have Mike Shank of M&T Bank in the back over there. Next, we have Dave Bollinger with Barnes Bollinger Insurance. And finally, we have Dr. Faye Papalardo with the Carroll Community College. Next, I'd just like to ask if anybody here is a board of directors for the chamber to please stand and be recognized. Don't be shy. It's okay. Thank you. Okay, and finally, I'd like to acknowledge Mike McMullen, our fearless leader and president of the chamber.
Thank you.
Mike was all embarrassed about standing up in front of everybody, so that's...
I'm pretty bashful.
Yes, I could tell. One of the ways members can support the work of the chamber and promote their business is through corporate sponsorship programs. When your business sponsors a breakfast, luncheon, or special event, you are supporting a wide array of programs and services that benefit all members, and you gain valuable exposure for your business and organization. Today's corporate sponsors are Rager, Lehman and Houck, PC, and Main Street Advisors. Our first sponsor's message will be delivered by Ryan Hastings, principal of Rager, Lehman and Houck. Please come on up.
Thank you very much for having us here today. I almost feel like it's a team meeting with all the RLH people here today, so hopefully I won't get too nervous up here. We appreciate the opportunity to co-sponsor this event this year with David. Just a little bit of background information on me. I am a tax principal with Rager, Lehman and Houck. I did grow up in Carroll County in the Westminster area and ended up calling home Pennsylvania in southern York County, and I work currently out of our Hanover office. But I'm very familiar with Carroll County, so that's good. It's good to be back down here. When I was asked to speak here today, just for a couple minutes, I was trying to figure out what I would talk about, and of course, taxes came to mind because that's what I do. And, for this, and I'm over here negotiating time with everybody because I could talk for hours on this stuff, right? So, I thought something good to do would be to talk a little bit about since this is a budget meeting, just spend a few minutes about the budget that recently came out at the federal level, the Green Book, and some of the underlying tax policies and things that are not going to happen right away, but things that they're thinking about for the future. So I'm just going to kind of touch on that to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what may be coming down the pike in a little bit. One of the major themes is to make the U.S. more competitive with foreign countries in terms of making it more friendly for businesses. Our tax rates in the United States are much higher than a lot of other countries, and they realize that these businesses are taking their resources elsewhere, and they want to make it more competitive. So that's probably something that we're going to see come down the pike. Tax code simplification is another thing. And usually that equals complication, because every time they try to make it simpler, it makes it more difficult. But we've heard a lot about it being a very complex and inefficient system for many years, and they're going to try to work to change that. Although with a lot of special interest groups and so on and so forth, it's a very difficult thing to do. So we'll see how that goes. And then, of course, there's going to be more increased compliance activities over the next couple years. We've already seen a little bit of that with the states and the IRS getting a little bit more excited about closing that tax gap and looking for some additional revenue. So definitely compliance is on the agenda. Real quickly, just some of the things for individuals. I kind of broke it down between individuals and business. I won't stay much on the topic of individuals, but in 2 years, the proposal is for the individual rates to go back up to what they were pre-Bush tax cuts. We're talking, almost a 5% increase there. So that's something to look forward to. They're also going to be limiting the itemized deductions, which is going to be a big revenue raiser. It's gaining some traction right now, so look for something along those lines. And also the capital gains tax rates, have been historically low for the past 10 years or so. They're looking to raise those up to 20% from 15% where they currently are, to just the upper incomers, those that make $200,000 single, $250,000 filing jointly. Those are the individuals that are going to get hit with a lot of these proposed tax increases. For businesses, one of the main things is they're going to look to make the 179 deduction permanent, and at a higher level. And 179 is where if a business buys equipment during the year, they can expense up to a certain dollar amount right away and take the tax deduction. This year, it's very favorable at $500,000, but in 2012, it's scheduled to go back down to $25,000. So what they're proposing is to keep it up at around $125,000. So it looks like it still should be available for everybody come 2012. Another big thing that's happening is they're probably going to get rid of LIFO, which is the last in first out method of accounting for inventory. Looks like that's going to go away effective 1/1/13, and they're going to be if you do account for your inventory on the LIFO method, you're going to have to pick it up in income over 10 years. So that's something that you want to be planning ahead for if that affects you. There's a whole bunch of other things here, but I'm going to kind of skip that. One thing that probably is of interest to everybody is the whole 1099 reporting thing. One of the things that came out of the Health Care Act last year, a provision that really wasn't related to healthcare at all, but kind of got everybody up in arms, was that businesses are going to have to send 1099s out to everybody that they do business with, including corporations and those that they're providing goods for, which is a big change from where we are today. So I know a lot of chambers. I'm not sure if this chamber's gotten involved in that initiative. Accounting societies that we belong to are fighting it very hard, because it is what the government's trying to do is make us do the work for them, and they're trying to close that big tax gap out there. And to the extent that they have people reporting payments back and forth, it makes their job easier to track down who's reporting their income and who's not. So anyway, President Obama wants to get rid of the goods portion of that, and he wants to keep the payments to corporations portion. But currently there is a bill out of the House, the Ways and Means Committee, that is going to try to get rid of the whole thing. So anyway, stay tuned for that, because that certainly is something that could be coming down the pike for you. And then finally, the last thing I'll talk about is the estate taxes. Very generally, obviously, at the end of last year, 2010, there was no estate tax. They didn't act prior to that, so we kind of been in a fog over the past couple of years as to what to do and how to plan for the estate tax rules. And right now, it's a $5 million exemption and also a 35% rate. President Obama's proposal is in 2 years, effective 1/1/12, that it would be back up to a 55% rate, and the exclusion would be $3.5 million. So He doesn't have much support for that now that he's dealing with the Republican, House. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But there's kind of some things that are on the table right now as far as taxes and that have been talked about in the budget. So hopefully you found that helpful. We do have, I did put together a packet for you. I hope everybody picks one up on the way out because we got like 80 of them. And I don't want to lug them all back with me. So there's a little information about our firm and where our offices are. We also have a couple copies of our e-newsletter that we send out on a monthly basis, and also a sign-up form in there if you would like to receive it. It's got very timely tax advice, not advice, but information and other things that you might be interested in. So I encourage you all to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to need that. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate that. And next we have up is the president of Main Street Advisors, Dave Peliquin. I'm not sure how well you negotiated your time, but you got 12 seconds.
That's what I figured. But I'm not hired to be a negotiator. That's the lucky thing.
There you go.
My good friend Ryan there took a couple of extra minutes, but that's okay. My topic isn't always real exciting to people either. I think it is because instead of taxes, I'm trying to help people on the other side guard their wealth, grow their wealth, etc. I've been a chamber member with Main Street Advisors for 11 years. Prior to that, I spent 9 years with the chamber, so it's really 20. And I was the head of professional development for a couple, 3 years with committees. What the chamber does is great. I've admittedly been kind of out of sight for a while, and I thought I'd just take a minute to tell you. We've been in Westminster, again, since spring of '99. We are a registered investment advisor, a fee-only firm for about 145 families. We manage about $42 million, and we are totally independent. We have a relationship. We still have a relationship with Rager, Lehman, and Houck, and I had negotiated with Randy Rager in the late 90s to move out from Towson, bring my clients I had with me, and then we've had this, like I said, special relationship where we work jointly with a lot of Rager, Lehman, and Houck clients. I'm going to be real quick. I'm just going to tell you, spur you to do some thinking. If you're a household that has really any amount, but in particular $100,000 or more of investments with a investment firm, to be sure that you're on the same page with their worldview and what they think they should be doing with your money, now more than ever. I tell people if they believe the way to have money invested today is the same as it was 5 or 10 years ago, they don't need to talk to me. If you think that the world's a different place investment-wise, I do too. And so you might just want to be checking around for different ways of looking at things. That's what we offer. That's what we give to clients. When you sit down and talk with us, you're talking to the people that make things happen. And it's not a distant office somewhere in another state that's making decisions for your money. On a lighter note, that means, though, listening to other points of view, doing your reading. I think you heard Ryan talk about the most likely increasing tax bite we're going to be paying. I would definitely concur with that. It's also tougher than ever to make money, and I've been doing this my whole life. And so when I tell you that, I'm not saying it to try and pick up clients. I'm telling you for your own good. So really, I got everybody quiet here, and I do that at Rager Lehman all the time. They only give me 5 minutes when I give their quarterly address or monthly address. So I'm going to stop right there. If you have an interest in either looking at what we do or talking to me, we're on the web, www.Main Street Advisors with street abbreviated. I've had to say it like that for 12 years. We couldn't get the street part, that way back in '98. Check us out on the website, email me, call me. I don't bite, and keep everything confidential. Otherwise, we're going to turn everything over to Ted here soon. Maybe we'll get some good news for once. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave and Ryan, and thank you for supporting the Chamber by sponsoring today. If anyone is interested in sponsoring an upcoming Chamber event, please see Mike McMullen before you leave today. Now let's begin our program. I'm sure most of you know Ted Zaleski as Carroll County's Director of Management and Budget for the past 8 years that he's been here to speak. Ted is responsible for budget, grants, and risk management functions, and he is also a major resource to the Chamber and to the rest of the community. Ted lives in Carroll County, just outside of Westminster. Today, as he's done for the Chamber for the past few years, Ted will talk about issues involved in the county's upcoming fiscal year's budget, and then we'll take your questions. So please help me in welcoming Ted up here. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we're about out of time. Thank you all for just want to thank Rager Lehman and Hauk for sponsoring me for I think this is the 5th consecutive year, and then picking up Main Street Advisors and David Peliquin. One of his daughters and my daughter go back together to a time it's almost hard for me to remember that they could have been that young. Steve Aquino, I didn't really know too much before today, but at Leadership Carroll, I do the local government day, and we did this budget exercise, and Steve played the budget director.
It's a lot of fun.
And got a little insight to how that works or doesn't work sometimes. Yeah, I had somebody come up to me before the session today and said, I always like coming to hear you talk, but I hate what you have to say. I said, well, thank you, I think. Yeah, I was looking at what I talked about last year and briefly considered just changing the date and pretty much using the same talk. But for my $100,000 speaking fee, I thought I ought to come up with something new.
Is that in the budget?
Well, that's what where'd Rich go? That's what Rich used to do for me.
Times have changed.
But going back to last year, one of the big things I talked about last year was unprecedented change. I said, here's Rich. He just ducked out while I was talking about that. I said, we're facing unprecedented change. And in the time since I talked to you last year, it's become abundantly clear that on that at least I was right. We have gone through and are still in unprecedented change. The impact of that change, the recession, the meltdown in the housing, financial, credit markets, all that is still dominating our budget situation and our ability to provide facilities, infrastructure, and services. Last May, when we adopted our budget and our latest 6-year plan, we kind of thought maybe we've hit bottom and we're going to start to see the recovery. And I've had to say this too many times in the last couple of years, but I was wrong. Maybe we hit bottom. I'm hoping that that's the case, but there's been little evidence of recovery. We're not seeing things getting better. So maybe we just take our good news as things haven't really gotten too much worse. Now, you may have heard about this. The recession is over. The official announcements have been made, and in fact, the recession has been over for some time now. And out in the larger economy, though they're inconsistent, there are signs of recovery. But here in Carroll County, specifically Carroll County government and the role we play in all of your lives, the impact of that recession is definitely not over, and in fact, is far from over. I shared some of these thoughts at a Carroll Community College Board of Trustees meeting a couple months ago. And after the meeting, somebody who was listening stopped me and said, I've never had my heart so eloquently ripped out. And I tell you, truly, my goal is not to rip out people's hearts. But one of the big challenges I have right now is getting people to understand that even as things start to look better on a large scale, that's not going to quickly translate into noticeable improvement at the local level, for local governments at least. And even as some of you as business people might start to see things turn around, that's not going to quickly translate into change for Carroll County government. There is a little bit of good news. This year, for the first time in a few years, we're not worried about are we going to make the budget. We believe that the revenue that we've expected is going to show up. And that's a change from where we've been recently, and that's some comfort. At least we're not scrambling during the year to try and make sure that we end the year okay. I want to go back a little bit to talk about, kind of where we've been in getting to our current place. Back in fiscal year 9, we began making changes, thinking about things, because we recognized that change was coming. Now, at that time, we had no idea how much change was coming, but we knew something was coming, and we began preparing for that. The last board reduced the workforce that reports to the commissioners. And you have to remember, in local government here, there's a lot of people you think of it maybe as county government who aren't really commissioner employees. The school system, the community college, the library, sheriff, state's attorney, none of those people report to the commissioners. But of people who reported to the commissioners, they eliminated more than 90 positions, 12% of their workforce, in an attempt to start making government somewhat smaller. We're back to a workforce about where we were in the late 1990s now. Last May, when we adopted the budget, we adopted a budget that was not only smaller than it had been in fiscal year 10, the previous year, but was also smaller than it had been the year before that, fiscal year 9. And the commissioners and the changes that they made focused to a great extent the impact of those changes on a lot of internal functions of government, things that most people just don't see too much. I lost a couple positions in my department, and I'm pretty sure that nobody was picketing the county office building, arguing for the restoration of those positions. It's just stuff people don't care about. And they made a very conscious attempt to try not to hurt those more direct services, the things that people do tend to care more about. And when I say limit the hurt, that's not to say that there hasn't been impact, but it's been more in terms of not seeing increased funding and less of actually losing funding. And we're talking things about here, the school system, the community college, the library, the nonprofit providers in our community, the places where when services change, somebody says, wait a second, what happened? That's not the way it used to be. And that was a very conscious decision by the commissioners. And I do need to point out there was one exception to that. The budget we adopted this year, the school system was held to maintenance of effort. They lost $2.8 million of county funding relative to where they had been the previous year. But even that, I want to put in a larger context. The budget before that, the county funding to the school system went up $7 million in a year when the entire budget went up $1.5 million. So even at that point, the commissioners were still making a very concerted effort to do what they thought they needed to do for education, which is one of those direct areas of service that touches a huge number of people in the county. But now, given that we haven't seen those signs of recovery that we were hoping we would when we adopted the budget last May, it's going to be getting harder to find ways to reduce what government does without starting to impact those things that people do care very directly about. A lot of that was about operating. On the capital side, we went through several years of pretty aggressive capital budgets. Commissioners were trying to address some concerns about the infrastructure of the county. But as we were going through that, it was fully understood that we were budgeting capital projects at a level that we could not maintain over many years. It was an attempt to take care of some things, knowing that we were then heading back down to a different level. And in fact, the current plan for our capital projects, even before adjusting for inflation, has us back at budgets that look much like they did about a decade ago. And if you then try and make some sort of adjustment for inflation over that time, we're in fact doing less than we were 10 years ago on the capital side. As we look ahead, the economy is not our only concern. Concern enough, but it's not the only one. State budget remains a concern for us. And of course, those of you who have heard me speak here or other places some number of times have heard me talk about the state budget and our relationship with them and how important that is to us in many ways. The governor's budget that he released a month ago, I guess, has relatively little new impact to the county, and in fact, is advertised and sometimes is holding counties harmless. What goes unsaid there is that it continues fairly significant cuts. Well, fairly significant is kind of understatement. Significant cuts that have been made in previous budgets and takes those on into the future. In a practical way, what the state sends counties now is almost gone. They are not really a significant revenue source for us any longer. And our worries now are not about what are they going to take away from us, but what are they going to give us in terms of costs that they pay today that they're going to ask us to pay tomorrow. The governor's budget includes one of those. The state does assessments, property assessments. The people all work for the state. The operations are handled by the state. The governor's budget would pass 90% of those costs on to counties. For Carroll County, that means about $1 million a year. Teachers' pensions, and while it always gets talked about as teachers' pensions, it is larger than that. It also includes many employees of the community college and the library. That's been a hot topic and remains one. The governor did not include passing any of those costs to counties in his budget. That doesn't mean that the General Assembly might not still act on that. And even if they don't, I find it pretty hard to think that those costs are not coming our way sometime. If it's not this year, is it next year? Is it 5 years from now? I can't tell you that. But it's too big a target for the state and too big a fix for the problems that they have for them to never get there, I think. If anybody in the state's listening, I'm not arguing for this. I'm just saying it seems like it's going to happen to us. And not going to give you the full rant, but give you just a mini rant on what the state calls aid to local government. This often gets talked about in terms of, well, look how much money is going to local government. What more do you want? And it often gets used in a way that's very misleading. And what they call aid to local government includes public schools, community college, library, health departments, and counties and municipalities. Public schools is about 90% of all that money. The money that actually goes to elected officials, your town mayors or county commissioners, is a very small piece of that pot of money. And if you look at how that's changed, and you can pick whatever time frame you would like, and you'll see basically the same story. Most of the increases in that funding have gone to school systems. Some has gone to community colleges, some has gone to libraries. Health departments have been hurt very badly, and counties and municipalities have been devastated as far as what's coming from the state. So if you hear somebody talking about that, just remember this point, okay? That is not about the county. We are not seeing, not only are we not seeing increases in state funding, we've had almost everything taken away. We have another thing in the mix too as we look at this next budget, and that's we have a brand new board of commissioners, our first board of 5 commissioners, and they are all new, although one of them does return from service several boards ago. They've been very public with some ideas, including smaller government. They want to see government get smaller, being less involved in certain things. And they've been very public about intending to do something to provide tax relief. And of course, those are legitimate, important policy initiatives, but we can't lose sight of acting on those has an impact on our ability to provide services and facilities and infrastructure. So as we look at our own revenue picture as it exists, what the state might do, and what actions the commissioners will take on these policy initiatives, there's a lot of pieces in the mix here to say where are we going to end up? What is this next budget and our next plan going to look like? And of course, the big problem when you tackle these things is not everyone will ever agree on what it is we should do less of. Clearly, we will have to do less of something, but what should that something be? Now, a little while ago, I was talking about why a larger recovery of the economy won't translate directly into recovery in local government. If we look at the state level, their largest revenue is sales tax. When the economy starts to get better, sales tax will rebound quickly. They move together. We of course have no sales tax, so we don't benefit in that way. With the exception of property tax, all of the county's most significant revenues have fallen from their highs of recent years, some very significantly. They will all recover, and we will see growth again. But that growth is going to be from new, lower starting points. So even if we see comparable growth, it's going to be some years before we see ourselves getting back to the same levels that we had with those revenues in the past. And where sales tax is the state's largest revenue, for counties, it's property tax. And with the changes we've been going through now, property tax, and don't hold me to this number, but I think is pushing now about 60% of all of our revenue. This is the big player for us. And things are changing here. The last two reassessments in Carroll County were roughly 20% declines. The next one, I'm hoping, will not be another 20%, but likely is another 15% or something like that. Back to this idea of unprecedented. We've never been there. We've never seen anything like this before. Now, even if the picture starts to get better, because of how the state handles property tax, we have the triennial assessment. You get done once every 3 years, then phased in every 3 years. And we have the homestead tax credit, so in rising times, revenue doesn't rise as quickly as assessments does. Even if we start to see improvement, those things slow down the impact to government revenues. And it's unlikely that we are going to see some spike in home sales and home values. You know, my hope is we're going to start to see more action there and price stabilization, but I think there's little reason to think that it's suddenly going to get much better and improve our situation. We are probably at least a handful of years away from seeing change in property tax revenue that starts to really change the picture that I'm laying out for you. And it's really difficult for me to put together any scenario. There's always assumptions. We're making projections. I can't tell you exactly what's going to be happening 6 years from now. But it's hard for me to put together any scenario that is not very modest revenue growth over the next handful of years. So back to the idea of reducing services, whether you're doing it by choice or because you're forced to, in concept, reducing services is easy, but difficult in implementation. There's little agreement on what services government should offer and at what level you should offer those services. And I suspect that in this room, even at one table, we probably could get pretty lively debates going on about, well, what should you do less of? What should you stop doing? Should it be, the community college, the library, some of our nonprofits, our relationships with the towns, the arts? Where do you go? And there's somebody in this room that would have been willing to answer yes to every one of those, I think. There's also somebody in this room who would be saying, wait a second, are you crazy? To every one of those. How do you reconcile those things? And there's the big trick. And there's the really interesting part about tackling these things and figuring out where we are going to end up. And I say this with all sincerity. Right now, I don't know where we're going to end up. I don't know what choices the board is going to be willing to make and not willing to make on these very specific ideas. I know in a big way more or less where we need to go, but we still have a long way to go on figuring out the specifics of all this. And we will start pretty soon. March 8th, I go to the commissioners to present a set of recommendations, which is a starting point for their discussions. This year, given the uncertainty we face in our situation and what they want to accomplish, it's maybe not as clear a starting point as it is in some other years, but it will begin the conversation at least. As always, I encourage you to pay attention to what's going on in this budget process and to start sharing your thinking now, whether it's, commissioners, I believe you should do this, or commissioners, I believe you should not do this. There's a tendency among many to not offer their opinions until after the budget's adopted, and then they say, what are you idiots thinking about? But it's too late at that point. It's really more valuable input if it's while you're still making the decisions. There are lots of opportunities for offering your opinions. You can write, you can email, you can phone call. The commissioners have public meetings. They allow public comment. There's a formal public hearing in May. The commissioners all get haircuts and shop at grocery stores and things like that, and they just love to be waylaid and have people offer their opinions on what they're doing wrong. But whatever your path, offer your thoughts. Understand that just because you think you know what's the right thing to do doesn't necessarily mean that that is what they're going to do, but they should hear from you. I'll stop there, and we can tackle whatever questions you might have on your minds.
You mentioned property taxes. In the good times, with the build-up property tax increases, have they been offset by the plunge in our bad times? Have they negated that? All those good years of the 90s that there was prosperity in real estate.
It depends on how far back you want to go, but I would say yes, we've probably largely lost the gains of the most recent housing bubble, if you want to think about it that way. House values are still clearly higher than they were a decade ago, but we've fallen far from where they were 5 years ago.
Do you think that, are you seeing it more dramatic plunge than a plus in good years? Probably.
No, I'm not sure I would say that it's more, but it's taken back a lot of it.
If I remember correctly, Carroll County is fairly heavy with the senior population. Do you see any particular difficulties coming for seniors over, say, working people or people who are not retired or not senior?
Could you repeat the question, sir?
Yes, sure. She was asking about our percent of senior population and implications for that. We're just going to tell people you can't live here once you've turned 60. Actually, I don't know that we have an unusually high senior population, but it's not something I've looked at relative to other jurisdictions. An aging population affects us in sometimes conflicting ways. They don't have kids in school. Schools are one largest expense. So that, in some sense, that's a good thing. Now they do tend to take other services, especially as you get older. The demand on emergency medical services, for example. But I think many people would make an argument that, on the fiscal balance sheet, that we're probably generally better off serving an older population than a younger population. But there's a lot of other things to go into the mix. I mean, do we want to just be a neighborhood of old people? There are implications for that as well.
Well, are they going to be able to afford to pay their taxes in a couple of years? When you look at seniors who have property, but they don't have a large income any longer, that type of thing might have an impact.
Well, not every senior is in bad financial situation, but there are some, and clearly there are some people who have lived in a home for 50 years and have seen values change pretty dramatically, and during the run-up, probably saw changes in their property tax that were far greater than their income change. There are things in place to help deal with that problem. Both the state and county have tax credits for certain situations related to that. And then, of course, the homestead tax credit rate, which holds the rate of growth in your tax bill lower than your assessments, keeps you from having to quickly pick up all that change. And in fact, with what we've seen with the rising prices and now declining prices, some people saw assessments grow to a point where they will never pay the property taxes on that value because it went up and came back down without their tax bill ever catching up to those numbers. Yes.
Ted, I have two comments. My first one is thank you for what you do each and every year. It's been very difficult for you. You're the man that catches all the flack and stuff when you have to bring this message to us. My second comment is my wife gets tired of me sitting in my chair listening to all the shows on TV, the news things, making my comments. She goes, why don't you take those to some of the meetings? So this one I will. I think it's a much easier pill to swallow when you're dealing with cuts in Carroll County here, is if everyone would know that they were going to suffer a little bit, that the percentage was going to be equal, that you would cut from this organization and that. And it's not like, well, why did they get all this and they cut us to pieces? I think if everyone knew that they were suffering equally, it would be a better pill to swallow. And as you know, last year and years before, I'm a strong proponent of staying away from our schools and our kids. That's our future. We've got to be able to compete with these foreign countries. And that's about all I have to say.
Okay. To quickly capture his two comments. The first one was to thank me for my brilliant work. And the second was to advocate basically across the board cuts to affect everybody the same way. And on the second one, I have to say, I will always argue against across the board cuts because what that says is everything has the same priority, and I don't believe that's true. If we made this very simple and said the budget was just two things, the sheriff and rec and parks, and we had to cut, I don't think anybody would argue that those are comparable priorities, and that will lead to decision making. And I think it gets much more complicated than that, but I think the same thing is true. There are some things I think we'd say if there's not enough money, it's just not as high a priority as something else, or we should. And the other thing is the commissioners face many constraints on their ability to cut certain things that they fund, much more than I think most people recognize. I think people expect that there's a level of control that the commissioners have that they really don't have in many cases. So even if they wanted to cut everything comparably, they can't necessarily accomplish it. Anybody else? Yes.
You indicated that the property tax accounts for about 60% of the revenue. What would be the largest two things that account for the other 40%? And then can you also speak about what are some of those constraints that the commissioners have?
Okay. Just asking about our revenue mix and for me to talk more about the constraints the commissioners face. Income tax is our second largest revenue. Property tax and income tax between the two of them now is up around 90% of all of our revenue. After that, you have recordation, interest we earn on investments, building permits. Then there's a long list of other things, but you're talking about $15,000, $50,000, $120,000. It's really driven by a very small package of revenues. And on constraints commissioners face, first, many of the entities that the commissioners fund are independent of county authority, set up in state law with their own authority. That includes the school system, the community college, the library, the sheriff, the circuit court administrative judge, and state's attorney are all constitutional offices. They're in the Maryland Constitution and elected to office. We fund the Board of Elections, another state office, the health department. Even though it says Carroll County Health Department, it is a state agency. We provide funding to a number of nonprofits. Now there, we do have full discretion to not fund them, but if we fund them, we don't control what they do. With that first group that I said, there are legal and practical constraints on what we can do. Some legal constraints, Board of Education, community college, state sets up something they call maintenance of effort. You cannot fund it maintenance of effort, but there are implications for doing that. With some of the constitutional offices, you get into questions of what is an appropriate amount of funding and who decides what that is. And there have been discussions on this in various counties at various times. And the general idea is that those elected officials, sheriff, state's attorney, circuit court judge, determine what is a reasonable amount to be funded. And that's the commissioners who are left to fund that. Now, I'm not saying there's no room to argue there. And clearly, if the sheriff came in and said, I want you to double the size of my budget, and went to court over it when he didn't get it, he probably wouldn't win. But on the other side, if the commissioner said, we're going to cut your budget in half, and we went to court over it, we probably would lose. As you bring that in, there's some range that's appropriate, but it's not full discretion. And with a lot of these, the commissioners can tell me, Ted, you are not going to spend that money. You are not going to do that activity. But for many of these things, the commissioners don't have that authority to do that. And in fact, people are generally pretty surprised by this, but the amount of the budget that the commissioners really directly control is only about 25% of all their funding. And in that 25%, there are things that say aren't really discretionary, like 911 would be in that mix. And we're not going to choose to turn 911 into a 9-to-5 operation. That funding has to continue. Wow. Usually have somebody who wants to go after something there. Okay, well, thank you very much.
There I go. I got the easy part. I get to just kind of like wrap things up. But Ted, you don't have the easy part. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the chamber and everybody here. It's not easy to come and have to deliver a message that's not something that we're all going to go out of here just saying, woohoo, this is great news. So, but it is why we have you talk after lunch and not before, so we don't want to lose our appetites. But just like a round of applause again for Ted. I'd also like to thank the community media folks. Where are you guys? Everybody stand up from there. Great job. Great job. Thank you so much. And Mr. Aquino for doing a fine job at helping to moderate this. The voice of Carroll County, the Carroll County Buzz. And our sponsors, Ryan and Dave, you guys, what you guys do and what anyone does who helps us with these meetings is keeps things going, brings folks together, and we couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much. All right, and I also wanted to thank the people here at the Best Western, staff at the Best Western, very nice job, wherever you guys are, thank you to them. I'll make sure I haven't missed anyone to thank. And we have some upcoming events, and they're all in the programs that we have here, so take a look. I will tell you, we have one that kind of came on us real fast. It's a joint networking event with the Greater Mount Airy Chamber, and it's tonight from 5 to 8 at the Cobblestone Grill in Eldersburg. I've never been there, but it looks really good on the website. What's nice about something like that, you can show up for 10 minutes, you can show up for 3 hours, and they will have some hors d'oeuvres, and there'll be a bit of an adult beverage or two served possibly. So I would highly encourage you to come, if not only for that reason, and to bring businesses together. So other events we have are all in here, and I'm not going to take up your time with that. We are beginning to accept applications starting March 1st for the class of 2012 Leadership Carroll. And I've had a chance to get to see what that's about, and it's an awesome thing. You know, Rich has done a wonderful job in my position with that, and we are just really excited. It's a great thing that we partner with the actual community college, and it is just, if you don't know what it's about, come and see me afterwards. We'd love to talk to you about it, but we will be taking applications starting March 1st. Are there any announcements from the floor. Have I missed anything? Anything anybody would like to announce real fast? We're actually going to finish up 5 minutes early, which is always a good thing. So you guys didn't take up that much time of the meeting. It was good.
It's always better that way.
Always better. Anything from the floor? Anything I missed, Peggy?
We'll be starting our energy cooperative spring campaign is underway.
Spring campaign, energy cooperatives will be starting. Anything else? I got to ask her, because if I miss something, I'll hear about it later. Oh, sorry.
I just want to briefly call attention to a brochure on many of your tables. The Random House Book Fair in its 14th year is next weekend. For those of you who have supported it in the past and joined us, we thank you and we encourage you to come again. Those of you who haven't been there, it's a great event for everybody. Come out and join us next Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you. And I will say, oh, I'm sorry, Sandy?
Since we have 5 minutes.
No, don't take all 5 minutes. But this wasn't licensed to take 5 seconds.
Talking about budgets kind of puts a frown on everybody's face, but if you need a smile, please consider participating in the Arts Council's Peep Show. I guarantee you it is one of the funnest events in town. It's a great way to get your word out and to come see what a creative community we have. Everything's on our website or I have info.
Excellent. And I will give one more plug. I know Pat already said it, but for the Business Expo that we're involved in with the Times and the college, April 2nd, would love to have you get involved in that. So other than that, no more announcements. Our meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming.